Hello. Thank you for being here today at the Side Hustle Growth Podcast. Joining me today is Carol Mae Whittick, and she is a creativity and spiritual life coach. So, this is for my fellow woo woo entrepreneurs out there because we are going to be talking about infusing spirituality into your entrepreneurial journey.
Mm.
But before we get into it, I must give Carol Mae a moment to shine. Tell us more about yourself, anything you'd like us to know. And thank you so much for being here with me today. Take it away.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your invitation. I know that to enter into somebody's podcast space is a hallowed space, because it's
Mm.
something that you have created. So I appreciate you giving me the time and sharing the conversation. And what can I say about myself? I've always been a creative from a youth. I was a creative person. It came from me being curious musician and just writing songs and books and making things. It was always my way, and it was always my and always still is my safe space, that place when I go into that place where I can be in tune with whatever it is that is feeding me and guiding me. And I really used the quiet space that I went into for my creativity as a way of protecting me from what was kind of quite a challenging upbringing. The outside world was very chaotic. There was no stability there. Not to apportion any blame, it's just that life happens like that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as children, we always need somewhere that we can go that is safe for us. And for me, the safest space was to go into my imagination and commune with all of the things. And it was in the process of creating that I kind of was very curious about where all this stuff was coming from. And even though I didn't have the language of spirituality when I was a young girl, I knew that I was bringing through something. And
Yeah.
over my years, and taking the journey into personal development and spirituality, I kind of put the two together and realized that I was being really guided through my life. And I've always then endeavored to keep doing something creative throughout my life. Without that, I'm not, if I need to be creating. If I'm not creating, you don't want to be around me so much. Frustration needs somewhere to go.
So I've only met the creative side, the creative Carol Mae. So I've gotten the best versions of you.
Mm,
So with that, I would like to start off with one of my main questions is what your journey from employee to entrepreneur was and what your experience, and even for you and what
mm.
you just shared, what your experience was maybe working somewhere. I'm not sure, you can share more, working somewhere where maybe your creativity might have been a little bit stunted, to now
Right.
making the decision to become your own boss and going to full-time entrepreneurship. What was your experience, your journey like?
Well, going back to being a young girl, I always had like a little side hustle, and I
Mm,
didn't realize that that's what it was at the time. So
yeah, yeah.
when I was younger, as I was learning to play the piano, then my little cousins around me wanted to do what I was doing. So I'd give them piano lessons, and I'd get like a few coins here and a few coins there. And then when people wanted their clothes, altered, I'd alter their clothes for them, or I'd make things for them. So I've always been doing like something. I've always realized that I've had something that I can monetize. Even
Mm,
then, at the time I didn't have a strategy, but it's like, oh, I can do this and people will give me money. And these were things that were very easy to me. As I left school and entered into the workforce, for the most part, I was doing kind of the regular stuff like retail and hospitality. And these initially were jobs that I just didn't really take very seriously because I was on a music career. So these were jobs that I went into to basically get me the money so that I could go
yeah,
into the studio and do that. So they were just a means to an end. So even though a lot of these jobs were not very creative, I just kind of utilized them for what they could give me financially. But then I'd always be learning something. And over the time, I could see that in every job that I've been in, I've learned something. And I think one of the most useful skills that I've ever learned through the work that I've done has been sales. that, because that kind of ties over into when you step into that entrepreneurial space. But I would say the real turning point came for me when I had the last time I had a what you call a real job, a 9-to-5 job. And
Yeah.
I was working in a production company, and we were a production company that dealt with businesses. So from one-man bands all the way to kind of like major law firms and marketing firms we were kind of a marketing spend, but from small to very large organizations. And we would create kind of like corporate videos for them, and we'd be putting them up on different areas of satellite TV and YouTube. At the time, YouTube was a new thing, so
Mm.
to create a video for someone and put them up on YouTube, this was like 2007, 2008. Not too many people kind of understood it, but then you were always appealing to everyone wants to be out there talking, showing themselves. And within the corporate world, it was very useful to have content like that, even back then. So I joined that company, and by 2008, it was very clear, we're going into the crash now, that people were pulling back on their marketing spend. So I knew that the writing was on the wall, because we were getting less and less clients in. So I knew that it wasn't going to be sustainable. And by June, July the following year, 2009, we got made redundant. And I wasn't really sad about that, because I was still doing music. I was still going and doing a lot of work in Europe for weekends, coming back and doing this job. I was gigging around London. So my book was full, and this job kind of got in the way a little bit, because it was taking up 5 days out of my 7, and I could do with it being the opposite way around. But I was slowly trying to work out how I was going to backtrack out of this job, and I didn't really know
Right.
how.
Yeah,
So for
yeah.
me, when I got made redundant, it was a blessing, because we kind of got a small redundancy, but we got some money. But one thing that really stuck with me was I'd been with that company for 3 years. And when I joined that company, there was about 5 of us, and we grew the company, because for the first couple of years, it really grew. But I was just really dismayed at how easy it was for us to walk into a room one day and get given some forms by some complete strangers and go, just fill this in, fill it in and send it back to us. Like, you don't have a job, go home. So I was like, I'm free, I'm going to get some money, but hang on a minute, I just put in a lot of energy into someone else's jobs, into someone else's company that, the financial situation had changed, but they'd run it into the ground a little bit as well, always not completely cushy.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I could never get that time back, And
Yeah.
even when he walked out the room, he didn't stop and say, sorry guys, or thank you. And I was just disgusted that, how dare you not even, you're not going to see us again, so just pretend for 30 more seconds that you care. And I
Yeah.
thought, never again am I going to do that and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and give it up that way. So it was out of, I'd made a decision. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I was never going to give more of my energy to someone else's
For
project than
someone
my
else. Yeah,
own.
yeah, for sure. And with what you just shared, how did you, and just knowing throughout your entire life, you were creative.
Mm,
There was, it sounded like you felt like, and I can absolutely relate to this. You felt like you didn't quite fit in
mm.
wherever you wanted, whatever room you were in. How did you land on being a spiritual life coach, or do you feel like it just happened very organically, or you were just called to it? How did you decide that's the direction to take it in?
It just made sense, because these are things that I've been doing, and the reason that I blend spirituality and creativity is because I kind of, one of my taglines, I would say, is creativity is spirituality, because
Mm,
without that connection to that wider part of yourself, that intuition, your imagination, your spirit, your soul, you're not going to be feeding through the original ideas in whatever form you choose to express it. So it doesn't just have to
yeah,
be the arts,
right, right.
because then if you're cut off from that, then you're going to be copying someone else, because you're not in contact with yourself. But if you can really find the connection between yourself and your soul, then what you create, even if many other people are doing similar things, it's always going to be authentic to you. And you're not going
Mm.
to have any fear about what anyone says. Listen, I spent decades trying to get into the big time in the music industry. I've faced rejection, I've faced
Yeah, yeah,
criticism,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and but I always kept going because I knew I had something, and I've allowed that to drive me. And I just want to open up people to the idea that there's always been something on your shoulder telling you. Like I said, whenever I was in a job where I kind of wasn't doing much music, there would always be like, I'd always know that, there'd be a frustration within me. There'd be just like a voice telling me that I couldn't stay there very long, or I had to get up with myself. So it's just it's guiding clients to really listen to that voice that's constantly always there. And
Yeah.
whatever your practice is for getting in touch with that intuition and trusting it is what I help open them up to, because once you know that, it's a superpower. No one can take that away from you.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to piggyback on what you just said, because I actually also had this question. I'm always curious about this.
Hmm.
Did you and also who you work with experience any kind of resistance in tapping into like the more spiritual quote unquote woo woo side? And how do you help people to navigate that?
Resistance within myself or external resistance? Let me get.
Whichever, however resistance will come up, like whatever it
Yeah.
would look, if it happens, it might not, but I just
Oh.
feel like just culturally, if people are experiencing any kind of dealing with any
Mm,
biases, if you will, or
mm.
just their upbringing, their conditioning, how do they navigate that resistance? Because I've had people say to me that they've wanted to tap more into a more spiritual thing, but just because of their family life or how they were brought up, they knew
Mm.
would be frowned upon.
The first, well, I experienced resistance externally from family who wanted me to do one thing, because in their mind they couldn't really see how I could make a living from all the things that I
Right.
said that I wanted to do. If I wasn't like out there being, Beyonce or whoever's, like, how can you possibly be making any money? If
Yeah.
you're not that, then what are you? So there was a lot of resistance because I kept on doggedly with that. And then as well, I can't say that I didn't experience internal resistance as well, because when your nearest and dearest are telling you the way that you're living your life is wrong, then you have to really connect to the part of yourself that knows that your expression is what you're here for, irrespective of who says what around you, like whether they love you or not, because ultimately they can never see through your eyes, they can never feel through your heart. And one of the things that one of the exercises I like to guide my clients through is to just see themselves in the future of actually living what they're doing. And the thing is, if you can see it clearly in your mind, then that's been placed there for you. We're not born to just consume in this world. We're actually born to create. And whether you want to look at it from a religious point of view or from a spiritual point of view, creation is your natural expression. So if you're not creating, you're consuming and just taking and not giving back. And if you want to build on your confidence, you start to really connect to the part of yourself that's only for you. You're guided by a vision. You get shown things that are going to be the expansion of you. By following the dreams that I was given, I learned skills, I met people, I traveled to places that I would never have gone if I'd have just done the things that people wanted me to do.
Mm.
So for whatever's happened, I don't regret any of that. And I'm just currently finishing off my book and writing different areas throughout my own life where I had particularly woo-woo experiences or things happen that I can see were very necessary for me to come to this point now. And I can see that my life journey, even though it didn't look like what I thought it would look like, has been completely on track, and everything has been very deliberate. You can only often tell by looking backwards how far you've come, because you're so fixated on where you want to go. But That's always been the thing for me, that it's been guided, it's made everything makes sense. And I encourage someone, just sit down and kind of write the things that have happened through your life, and you'll see there's a clear pattern that's been informing you, guiding you, educating you, expanding you in a way that nothing external can. You can learn and you can be guided from coaches and education and everything like that, but you always then want to infuse your stamp to make yourself unique and authentic, so that you shine and you inspire in the way that we're all here to do for each other.
I love that answer. That was beautiful. Do you find there are certain, this is just me being curious now, are there certain
Mm.
roles that people have that they want to tap more into their spirituality, or is it just far and wide they come to you needing your guidance as a spiritual life coach? Is there a certain industry you tend to notice? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of woo-woo people in this industry.
The part that has maybe not surprised me, but I kind of knew it was there, was especially women within corporate
Okay.
world,
Yeah.
where they've spent a long time doing the right thing, and many of them being super successful in what they do, in terms of they've made the money, they've kind of moved up within the structure of their organization. So externally, it looks like she's killing it, and she probably is, but then there's always a part of her that knows. But
Mm.
she's overridden that, whereas I just couldn't override that part of me that was going, this ain't it. Sometimes people can keep pushing forward, and I suppose if you get to the point where you're financially winning by overriding your intuition, because it's an unknown path, it ain't for the weak,
Mm.
stepping
Mhm.
off from everything and the way that everyone goes, and going into this uncharted water takes a level of delusion, for you to go, that I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to follow that. So I suppose, like, when I first started, I thought I would be working solely with women within the spiritual community who are already woo and open to that, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
opening up more to those who you would think wouldn't even like consider these things, but people are more open to the conversation now, um in a way that I'm glad of, because when we all kind of find who we are from the core, we'll change the world that way. There's too much external kind of box ticking and box placing and ideas of what we should do, when our unique expression is when everyone shines brighter. We always remember the people who stand out, who are doing extraordinary things. So imagine if everyone was doing something extraordinary. What a world, right? Yeah.
Yeah, what a beautiful world it would be if people just were able to confidently tap into who they're meant to be, who they're being called to be,
Hmm.
without all the external. That's why I wanted to ask that question about like resistance, and
Yeah.
because now it's for some, like you expected it to be people who are already spiritual, but many don't know how to navigate it. They don't know how or where to start, and they
Mm.
need someone like you to guide them through, or to give them the validation that they need, to tell them,
Hmm.
hey, like, this is what you're meant to be doing. This is what
Yeah.
you're called to do, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And this is going wonderfully. So, everything that you have shared with us so far,
Mm.
what has been like the one of your proudest, or you already kind of said you were surprised by who tends to come to you, but has there ever been a moment or a client that you worked with, you're just like, wow, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I was called to do. I'm sure you have many of those moments, but do you have like an example that kind of jumps out at you right now to share?
I would think of someone who there was, I was surprised that she even turned up on the chat before I even went into, because
Yeah.
I just knew it was a very kind of nervous person, and
Okay.
wasn't really the best at speaking out, wanted to do stuff, but then would have all the reasons why it couldn't happen. It's like, well,
Right.
then there's my husband, and like, what are these people going to say, and I've been doing this for so long. And I'm like, well, let's just have a chat. Let's just see, how exciting it could be for you if you just started to play around. Let's not try and turn it into anything other than you playing around in a part of you that feels restricted. And I always like to, um invite people to look back on their lives, because you don't just wake up one day with this. There's always been many times where you would have got the tap, you would have got the whisper, you would have got the knowing. And it's just kind of guiding back to like seeing, oh, hang on, actually that happened. Yeah, I remember that, and just kind of going back to, there's probably something that happened that was so out of the ordinary that you brushed it off because you couldn't discuss it with the people around you. And it was just seeing when a kind of like a moment just went off and went, yeah, that sounds a bit like, yeah, okay, and I'm like, well, you've got that avenue to go back
Yeah.
and do something, and then just find something that you want to channel it into. It doesn't have to be art, unless that's what you want to do, but it's just find a way of doing something, find a way of writing, find a way of reading, play around with what you see in the world. Be curious about other artists. I'm always curious about how things are made because I want to know the process. And in
Yeah.
seeing the process of how something is made, it kind of gives you an idea of like, oh, maybe I can look at things differently. So I'd invite her to listen to her favorite songs and just try and hear different layers. And it wasn't that she wanted to go into music. She didn't really know where she wanted to go. And we're still kind of figuring that out. But it was just, she just wanted to feel more of herself, because she kind of coming to that 50 birthday and just going, is this all
Is
it's
it?
going to be? And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you're at the perfect point in your life now when you turn 50, where we're just like, okay, five decades of information and experience. What am I going to do with that? And then be able to play around. So it was just like reminding her that spirit, her spirituality, her soul has been talking to her for a long time. And then just allowing her to see that for what it was, as opposed to, oh, I'm just crazy and no one will understand me. I'm like, no, go back to that and see that that's not the only time, but see the magic in that moment, relive
Yeah.
that moment if you can. And then just seeing someone realize like, oh, there is more to me than not just what my husband thinks, or maybe what just your husband's reflecting. It's, I don't do relationships, I don't talk to people from being a relationship guide or coach, but the more that you can start to embody something that is untouchable, the more magnetic you become. And even the people that have been around you for a long time, when you start to like embody something, it's like, who is she? And it's, she's noticed how it's just changed people's response to her, because she's
Yeah.
walking around now feeling that she's hearing something, she's kind of connected to something that she's been ignoring for like half of her life. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, let's use that and see how people see when you walk and that you're walking in your, or walking in towards your own greatness. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. It's almost like she's being reborn. Like she's actually seeing the world through the eyes or the lens that she was supposed to see it through, and she's
Yeah.
creating her own. She's untelling, I like to say untelling and retelling her story in
Mm.
her own. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. I like a good segue, of course. With everything you just shared, what do you have? What do you have coming up? What are we working on? What should we be looking out for from Carol Mae?
So I'm in the process of writing my story, which is just a guide through how I discovered and trusted and lent into my creativity all through the years, and how it's blossomed into the work that I'm doing now. It's like a no-brainer for me to do this, because like life has been given it to me as well. And it's interesting as well, when we talk about, resistance, then I'm kind of always trying to like just step over my own resistance, because I know this is an extra layer of vulnerability that I'm going to in sharing stories that I may not have shared before, and just putting it out there for it to go anywhere and be picked up by any hand. I don't know who's going to read it, so there's also that as well. So that's a growth for me. So you can also find me on my website and on social media, but something that I'd like to share with your listeners is I have a short audio course called Embody Her, and it's about embodying higher energetic resonance, and the her is kind of like part of my brand, and there's a long
Yes.
enough story about that, but that in itself came from a real creative endeavor. And the Embody Her course is basically just about stepping into the future version of yourself and taking action from there. So oftentimes we're like, oh, I'm starting this journey. I'm a beginner. I'm going from day one. What do I do? And I'm like, if you could feel into the version of yourself that's 5 years ahead of yourself and embody that energy and embody that perspective, what would that future self tell you is a step that you need to do today? So that's the Embody Higher Energetic Resonance course that you can do over a number of days as well. And for any of your listeners, if they want to take part in it, just use the code podcast and it's yours for it's a gift.
It's a gift. Okay. And everything, of course, thank you very much. Everything will be linked in the description. Anybody that wants to take advantage of that, and I'm sure everybody will once they check out
Mhm.
this episode. So that's a beautiful gift. Thank you for sharing. Before I absolutely positively let you go, I have to ask you for a nugget. Do you have anything to share with the audience before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I always like to say creativity is spirituality. No, often we kind of separate spirituality, and spirituality can be so many different facets. There are so many different ways into what people will call spirituality. But ultimately, spirituality is just a higher level of intelligence that you have. We think about the basics, but your knowledge and your physical being and your emotional being. But if you see yourself as a spiritual being and use your creativity as the gateway to that, and the more that you can embody your own spirituality, that can be your practice, that can be your meditation, that can be your prayer, whatever way you use it. Spirituality is from your creativity, and creativity is why we're all here.
Yes. Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, for being so candid, so transparent, and just beautifully expressing who you are and who you're meant to be, and being here today, being here, being you, and vibing with me. I really, really appreciate you, and I will see you soon.
Thank you so much.